In a region torn by conflict, the humanitarian worker felt the tension in every corner he walked. Rumors spread through the dusty streets and crowded markets. An armed group was planning attacks, and aid workers like him were in danger. Even though fear hovered in the air, he refused to let it dictate his actions. Every day he carried food and medicine to families who had no one else to rely on, moving carefully through narrow alleyways and war-torn villages, aware that danger could appear at any moment. Locals whispered warnings when he passed, their eyes filled with concern. Yet they also trusted him deeply because they knew he would never abandon them. The worker's mind raced with possibilities. He imagined the worst, yet he could not turn away from those who depended on him. Each delivery felt heavier, the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders, yet he pressed on, guided by a sense of duty that went beyond fear. He noticed signs of unease in the villages, the tense conversations, the locked doors, the way parents clutched their children a little tighter when strangers approached. But he also noticed the small acts of humanity that persisted despite the threat. Children still laughed when he handed out treats, and elders still nodded in silent gratitude when he offered medicine. He understood that he was not just delivering supplies, he was delivering hope. The worker moved cautiously, studying every path and every face, aware that the rumors of violence could turn into reality at any moment. Nights were the hardest, as he lay awake listening to distant sounds of unrest, thinking about the families he needed to reach the next day. Every decision became a careful calculation. Which roads were safe, which neighborhoods were more vulnerable, and which locals could guide him through the invisible dangers. He could feel the tension growing around him like a storm about to break. But he also felt a quiet determination that he would not abandon the people who had no one else. Fear existed, yes, but it was tempered by the knowledge that turning back was not an option. He had chosen this path knowing the risks, and he understood that his presence, however small it seemed, could make a difference in the lives of those who might otherwise go without food, medicine, or comfort. Each knock on a door, each smile in exchange for a meal, reminded him of why he continued. Because someone had to be there. Because someone had to stand when others could not. And because in a world filled with uncertainty, human compassion could still light a path forward. As he walked through the dusty streets that morning, a subtle feeling prickled at the back of his neck. Something was off. Footsteps seemed to echo a little too closely behind him, and shadows lingered where they shouldn't. Locals, who usually greeted him with warm smiles or nods of recognition, now leaned behind doorways or peeked cautiously from windows, their eyes flicking toward him and then scanning the street. Whispers floated in hushed tones, soft enough that only those paying attention could hear, murmurs of danger, rumors of strangers who might not have kind intentions. The humanitarian worker moved carefully, alert but calm, trying not to show fear, yet his instincts told him he was being watched. He noticed small gestures that spoke volumes. A volunteer lingering slightly longer at his side, a local vendor suddenly offering water, just in case, and children tugging at their parents' sleeves to warn them about someone nearby. It was confusing. Some humans seemed wary of him, as if they suspected him of something, while others, without explanation, began shadowing him quietly, their presence protective, instinctive, almost familial. He couldn't understand why they were so intent on keeping him safe, but he sensed a quiet solidarity forming around him, a human shield born from trust rather than orders. Every turn of the street heightened his senses. He learned to read the signals of those around him, the subtle nods, the slight shifts in posture, the way a shopkeeper would casually block a certain path with a cart. It was clear that danger was near, yet he also realized that he was not alone. The villagers, the volunteers, and even the local workers who once seemed indifferent were now part of an unspoken network, their awareness matching his own. He began to observe patterns, the timing of footsteps, the direction of unfamiliar faces, the way the wind carried sounds of movement, and each detail added to a growing mental map of vigilance. He realized that human instinct was extraordinary. While he had his own experience and training, the people around him seemed to sense threats in ways he could not explain. It was a mixture of fear, care, and understanding that transcended language or reason, a shared instinct to protect, to watch out for one another. And in that tense, charged environment, a quiet truth became clear to him. He was not just delivering aid. He was part of a living, breathing network of humanity that thrived on connection, compassion, and instinct. Though the threat was real and the suspicion constant, the solidarity of those around him gave him a strength he hadn't anticipated. He realized that human courage was not just about facing danger alone. It was about the invisible bonds that tied people together, the way ordinary humans could instinctively act to guard, to watch and to care even without understanding why, simply because one life mattered to another. The night was quiet, the village dimly lit by scattered lanterns, and the humanitarian worker sat in his small makeshift quarters, reviewing the day's deliveries and tallying the supplies he had distributed. The usual hum of nocturnal insects filled the air, but there was an undercurrent of tension, a feeling that he couldn't quite shake. As he looked up from his notes, he noticed movement in the shadows outside, a figure lingering, careful not to be seen directly, yet close enough to be recognized by anyone paying attention. It was a local volunteer, someone he had seen in the daytime helping distribute food and medicine, now staying near his quarters well after her shift had ended. She carried no weapon, no badge, no authority, only a calm, quiet presence that seemed to radiate vigilance and care. He blinked in surprise, uncertain at first if it was intentional or coincidental, but the gentle way she positioned herself, always visible enough to notice yet careful not to intrude, made it clear she was there for him. The realization hit him slowly, a warmth spreading in the chest he hadn't expected. A complete stranger had chosen to put themselves at potential risk, standing watch over someone who had done nothing more than help their community. He felt a mixture of gratitude, disbelief, and humility, recognizing that human kindness could appear in the most unexpected forms, even in a place riddled with danger. He watched her silently, noting the subtle signs of alertness, the slight tilt of her head when a distant sound broke the night, the steady way she adjusted her position without ever alarming anyone, and the quiet reassurance in the way she remained poised but ready. He realized that this wasn't just protection, it was trust, a statement that he mattered enough for someone to care without asking anything in return. The night stretched on, and though he could not speak his appreciation aloud for fear of breaking the fragile calm, he felt profoundly connected to the volunteer, understanding that in moments of danger, human empathy and courage often came not from orders or obligation, but from instinct and choice. This first act of guardianship, simple in appearance but immense in meaning, shifted something inside him. He felt seen, valued, and supported, not by an authority or a system, but by the quiet, unwavering presence of another human being willing to act out of care. In that night's stillness, he learned that protection could be silent and bravery could wear the face of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. It was the first hint of a larger truth. In places where fear and uncertainty reigned, humans often became the shields for one another, motivated not by duty alone but by compassion and recognition of shared vulnerability. And as he drifted into a light, cautious sleep, he knew something important had changed. Someone had stood for him when it mattered most. And that gesture, small as it seemed, carried the weight of profound trust and unspoken loyalty. Over the next few days, the humanitarian worker began to notice subtle changes in the way the locals treated him, small gestures that carried great meaning. A shopkeeper would quietly glance down an alley before signaling him to pass safely. A neighbor would gently guide him away from an uneven path at night, and someone else would discreetly alert him when strangers lingered too long near the aid station. These actions were quiet and unspoken, simple yet full of intention, as if they were saying, without words, "We are looking out for you." At first, he felt uneasy accepting their help, unsure if it was a test, a trick, or just the natural kindness of people who had grown cautious in a dangerous environment. Each time someone stepped forward to protect him, he hesitated, watching them closely, analyzing whether their actions carried hidden motives. But slowly, he began to notice the sincerity in their eyes, the calm, steady way they moved, the careful timing of their interventions, and the unmistakable sense of care behind each gesture. No one demanded recognition or asked for payment. They acted out of instinct, empathy, and respect for his mission. The small acts were everywhere. Locks were checked twice before he entered a building, lanterns were subtly placed to light his path, and someone always seemed to be near enough to intervene if trouble arose. It was not a show of force, but a network of trust woven through simple, thoughtful behavior. He began to understand that protection did not always mean confrontation. Sometimes it was foresight, attentiveness, and presence. Gradually, the worker's initial hesitation melted into gratitude, and he allowed himself to rely on the locals' support, realizing that they were not only safeguarding him but also reinforcing a bond that transcended fear and suspicion. Each day, he grew more attuned to these small acts, learning to recognize the signals that indicated danger and the gestures that offered reassurance. The collective vigilance of people who had no obligation to help him became a powerful shield, and in return he felt a sense of responsibility to honor their trust by continuing his work, carefully and respectfully. This quiet collaboration transformed the way he moved through the village. He no longer felt alone or exposed, but part of an unspoken community of care and protection. In every nod, every guiding hand, and every alert to possible danger, he saw humanity at its most instinctive and profound. These small acts, seemingly minor, carried a weight far beyond their appearance, teaching him that sometimes survival depended not on weapons or strategy, but on the simple human willingness to look out for one another. Through their gestures, he learned patience, trust, and the delicate art of accepting help without shame. By observing their consistency and commitment, he understood that courage could be quiet, and bravery could exist in the smallest, most ordinary deeds. Over time, the humanitarian worker's fear and uncertainty diminished, replaced by the confidence that he was not merely a lone figure in a volatile region, but a human being surrounded by others who would stand with him, ready to act when needed silently, selflessly, and unwaveringly. The quiet sense of trust that had been building over days was suddenly put to the test when a skirmish erupted near the settlement. Gunfire shattered the evening calm, echoing across narrow alleys and scattering small animals into the shadows. The humanitarian worker froze for a moment, his heart pounding as the sharp cracks of weapons reminded him of the danger surrounding them. Panic might have been natural, but instead he saw something that made him stop and stare. The locals, ordinary villagers who had never handled a weapon in their lives, moved instinctively to protect him. Mothers grabbed children and ducked behind walls. Yet they carefully positioned themselves between him and the source of danger, as if silently saying, "We will not let harm reach you." Fathers and young men, who had worked alongside him distributing aid, leaned against doorframes and makeshift barricades, using their bodies and presence as shields rather than charging blindly. Their faces were tense but determined, showing no hesitation even when stray bullets zipped too close. The worker's mind raced. He had been taught to respect courage, but this was different. This was selfless, instinctive bravery, a natural response to seeing someone they cared for at risk. He realized these people had not been ordered to protect him, they had not been trained for combat, and yet they were willing to face danger without question. Each move they made was calculated, not reckless, guiding him away from open spaces, signaling safe paths with subtle gestures, and covering blind spots he could not see. He wanted to speak, to thank them, but no words were needed. Their actions spoke louder than any speech could. For a long moment, it felt as if time had slowed. The chaos of gunfire and shouting became a backdrop to the quiet courage displayed in the faces around him. He began to notice details he had never seen before. A young volunteer crouching low, a shopkeeper holding a fallen plank to shield a narrow passage, a grandmother silently kneeling to hide a child and creating a human barrier that stood firm against potential harm. Every instinct he had as a human being told him to flee, yet he remained still, overwhelmed by awe and respect as these ordinary humans became his protectors. Their bravery was not about heroics or glory. It was about instinct, care, and a sense of shared humanity that transcended fear. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be truly guarded. not by weapons or walls, but by the selfless willingness of people who valued another life above their own safety. This first test, terrifying as it was, revealed a deeper truth: the human spirit, when driven by empathy and responsibility, could create shields far stronger than steel, and that in the midst of danger, ordinary people could become extraordinary guardians, teaching him a lesson about courage, trust, and the quiet power of humanity that would stay with him forever. After the first real test of their courage, the humanitarian worker felt a deep curiosity stir inside him. He had seen their bravery in action, but he needed to understand the heart behind it. Sitting down with the villagers, he began to ask questions, not with suspicion, but with genuine interest. "Why are you doing this?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answers he might receive. One by one, the locals shared their stories, their voices calm but firm. An elderly woman spoke of the time a neighbor had risked everything to pull her family from a flooded street without asking for thanks or reward. A young volunteer told of a stranger who had guided her through a chaotic market during an attack, ensuring she reached safety before thinking of themselves. Each tale seemed small at first, ordinary even, but when collected together, they painted a picture of a community built on quiet courage and unwavering loyalty. He realized that these people had no armor, no formal training, and no orders compelling them to act. Yet, when danger appeared, they did not hesitate. Their actions were born not from fear of authority, but from an instinctive understanding of human responsibility, that when someone is vulnerable, it is natural to protect them. The worker noticed patterns in their behavior. They watched each other's backs, communicated with subtle gestures, and silently coordinated to minimize risk while maximizing protection. There were no grand speeches, no claims of heroism. Everything was done calmly, efficiently, and with respect for the lives around them. As he listened, he understood that loyalty was not just about friendship or obligation, but about a deep-rooted belief in the value of life itself. It wasn't a transactional thing. They expected nothing in return, not praise, not material reward, not even recognition. This understanding began to reshape his own perspective. He had come into a volatile place, thinking of danger, strategy, and risk assessment. But he learned that courage and loyalty often emerge from ordinary hearts that choose to care. Even in the face of threats far greater than themselves, these villagers had made a conscious choice to act, guided by empathy and the shared knowledge that humans are strongest when they protect one another. The lesson was profound yet simple. In the darkest times, true strength is rarely about skill or power. It is about trust, commitment, and the willingness to put another's life above your own comfort or safety. He saw it reflected not just in stories, but in the quiet actions around him. The way someone blocked an open path to danger, the way they shared scarce food, the way they offered silent support without asking anything back. That moment reshaped him entirely, showing that heroism could be humble, silent, and deeply human, and that loyalty rooted in care could turn ordinary people into guardians capable of facing unimaginable threats together. That night, the tension in the settlement was thicker than ever. The distant sounds of engines and whispered commands signaled that the armed group was closing in, moving faster and with more determination than before. Inside the small compound, the humanitarian worker felt his heart pounding, a knot of fear twisting in his stomach, yet he was not alone. Around him, the locals who had quietly taken it upon themselves to protect him moved with a calm urgency that belied the danger outside. They whispered instructions, nudged him to safer spots, and positioned themselves at vantage points with an instinctive precision that surprised him. None of them carried heavy weapons, but their resolve radiated strength far beyond anything that steel or gunfire could provide. When a scout from the armed group wandered too close, one of the volunteers stepped forward, standing firm, using nothing but presence and determination to drive the intruder back, while another silently signaled the worker to stay low and out of sight. The worker watched, astonished, as ordinary people, farmers, laborers, and local volunteers, risked their own safety without hesitation or fear, not because of orders or training, but because protecting life had become instinctive. Every warning, every gesture, every careful movement showed a bond far stronger than mere gratitude. It was mutual trust forged in the quiet crucible of shared danger. He realized that these people had not chosen him as a guest to shelter, but as one of their own, and in return, he felt a responsibility that went beyond words. The bond between them transcended survival. It was humanity acting at its purest. He watched a young volunteer step into the open for a brief moment to block the path of an approaching threat, a subtle but brave act that could have cost her life, and yet she smiled reassuringly at him afterward, silently saying, "We are together in this." In that moment, the worker understood the weight of courage. It was not loud or celebrated, but quiet, deliberate, and unshakable. It was in the shared glances, the unspoken coordination, the readiness to act even at personal risk, and the unwavering commitment to protect one another. He felt the depth of connection ripple through him, a profound realization that courage and loyalty were reciprocal. The humans guarding him were not merely performing acts of kindness. They were extending the most human of qualities: trust, sacrifice, and empathy, and he, in turn, felt compelled to honor that by staying calm, following their guidance and valuing the unity that had formed. That night, as the shadows moved and danger crept closer, the worker saw the extraordinary in ordinary people, and he understood that in times of extreme risk, humanity's greatest strength is the willingness to stand together, to shield one another without expectation, and to act with unwavering faith in the shared dignity of life. It was a night that would forever change his understanding of courage, loyalty, and the true power of human connection. After the danger had finally passed and the echoes of gunfire and shouted commands faded into the night, the humanitarian worker found himself sitting among the people who had risked everything to protect him. The moonlight filtered gently through the simple walls of the small settlement, casting soft shadows as they huddled together, tired but unbroken. No one spoke loudly. The air was heavy with relief and quiet reflection. Slowly, stories began to emerge. Tales of past hardships endured, families saved, sacrifices made, and dangers faced without hesitation. Each story carried the weight of experience, the kind that comes not from training manuals or heroic movies, but from living through the harshest trials and choosing to act out of empathy and instinct. He listened intently as one volunteer recounted how neighbors had once saved each other from a flood. Another spoke of smuggling medicine through dangerous roads for those who had no other hope. And a third shared memories of standing guard in silence, knowing their lives were at stake but determined to protect life anyway. The worker felt a profound sense of recognition, not recognition of himself, but recognition of the incredible resilience embedded in ordinary humans. He realized that bravery was not always loud or celebrated. It could be quiet, patient, and steadfast. These people did not act because they were forced to, nor because they sought reward or recognition. They acted because it was part of who they were, because protecting others was instinctive, rooted in respect, love, and a shared understanding of vulnerability. Watching their faces, marked with exhaustion yet calm with purpose, he saw empathy and courage woven together like a shield, a human shield that could not be broken by fear or threat. He began to understand that what he had experienced was more than personal safety. It was a lesson in what humanity could achieve when it acts collectively, guided by compassion and moral strength rather than mere obligation. The worker felt a deep gratitude, but also a quiet humility, knowing that he had been allowed a glimpse into something extraordinary, the invisible threads of loyalty and courage that bind people together in the face of danger. He realized that the humans who had guarded him were symbols of a greater truth, that in times of extreme threat, ordinary individuals become extraordinary not because they seek glory, but because they respond to the call of shared humanity. Sitting there, surrounded by tired yet steadfast guardians, he understood that he had witnessed a rare and profound gift, the unspoken power of human solidarity, where empathy and respect create a force stronger than any weapon. A shield forged by love, instinct, and unwavering courage. It was a recognition that would stay with him forever, changing the way he viewed humanity and the quiet, fearless strength that lives in the hearts of ordinary people. After returning from the tense days in the volatile region, the humanitarian worker felt an overwhelming need to share what he had witnessed. Sitting at his small desk in a quiet office, he began writing letters, reports, and detailed accounts of the events that had unfolded. The threats, the small acts of courage, the moments of quiet vigilance, and the unwavering bravery of the ordinary humans who had risked everything to protect him. He described not just the danger, but the remarkable qualities that had stood out: trust, loyalty, empathy, and the instinct to act selflessly without seeking reward. Every paragraph carried the weight of gratitude, as he made sure that each person's name, each act of courage, and every small decision to protect another human being was remembered and honored. As he sent these accounts to aid organizations, humanitarian networks, and colleagues across the world, he noticed how his story began to resonate far beyond his own experience. Emails and letters arrived in return from volunteers, aid workers, and even ordinary citizens who admitted that his story had changed the way they saw those around them. People began discussing the importance of trusting ordinary individuals, of looking for courage in unexpected places, and of valuing loyalty and empathy as much as skill or authority. The story became more than a personal testimony. It became a lesson in humanity, showing that heroism does not always come in uniforms or titles, but often in quiet, selfless actions taken by people who act because it is the right thing to do. Wherever he traveled, he made it a point to speak about those who had guarded him, not as a way to glorify himself, but to ensure that the spotlight remained on the humans who had demonstrated extraordinary courage in ordinary circumstances. He explained how trust had saved lives, how ordinary citizens had made choices that prevented disaster, and how the bond of shared humanity could overcome fear and danger. Aid organizations began including his accounts in training programs, workshops, and team discussions, highlighting the unseen but powerful role that trust and loyalty play in crisis situations. His story inspired other workers to pay closer attention to the people around them, to recognize courage in small acts, and to appreciate the strength that comes from human solidarity. Each time he shared his reports, he remembered the faces of those who had watched over him, the quiet glances, the subtle warnings, the readiness to act without hesitation. It became clear that what had begun as a personal ordeal had grown into a universal message. Ordinary people, when guided by empathy, loyalty, and courage, could make an extraordinary difference in the lives of others. His realization deepened with every retelling. The humans who had protected him were not exceptional because of their skills or positions, but because they had acted from the heart, proving that the true strength of humanity lies in its willingness to care for one another, even in the face of danger, uncertainty, and fear. Years after the tense and dangerous days he had spent in that volatile region, the humanitarian worker returned, carrying with him memories that were both painful and inspiring. The once tense streets now felt alive with recognition and warmth, as villagers, volunteers, and the very humans who had once guarded him came forward to greet him. Their smiles, open arms, and gentle gestures reminded him that the bonds formed in the crucible of danger were not fleeting. They were enduring, built on shared risk, trust, and mutual care. As he walked through the narrow lanes and familiar corners of the village, he saw the subtle signs of life continuing despite past hardships: children playing near repaired homes, women tending gardens, and men sharing stories of resilience and recovery. Everywhere he looked, he saw reflections of the courage that had once protected him. The locals spoke of those nights with reverence and gratitude, of the fear they had faced yet overcome to ensure the safety of another human being, and how their collective bravery had shaped not only his survival, but their own sense of purpose and unity. He realized that their courage was not something extraordinary that belonged only to a few. It was a natural, instinctive response to the humanity they saw in him, just as he had seen humanity in them during moments of crisis. Conversations flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and occasional tears, as memories of shared danger and triumph resurfaced. He saw how the acts of protection he had once received had become stories passed on, shaping the values of new volunteers and inspiring a new generation to act selflessly. Walking through the village square, he noted the small ways in which life had continued, houses repaired, community centers rebuilt, and even simple gestures like shared meals and open doors that reflected the unity and resilience of the people. Every handshake, every nod, every quiet smile was a reminder that courage and protection were not fleeting gifts. They were earned through trust, tested in the hardest of times, and remembered long after the immediate danger had passed. In the faces around him, he saw the living proof of a principle that had guided him through life: humans first, fear never. It was more than a slogan. It was a philosophy that had been lived, demonstrated, and carried forward by ordinary people who chose to act with bravery, empathy, and unwavering loyalty. As he prepared to leave, the worker knew that the legacy of those moments, of vigilance, care, and selfless protection, would continue to inspire countless others, not through medals or recognition, but through the quiet, enduring strength of human connection. In that village, in those faces, in the shared stories, the truth was clear. Courage and protection are not merely given. They are nurtured, shared, and remembered for generations.